Absolute purview as your moderator in this critically important conversation. Now, we all know that food is the single strongest lever to optimize human health and environmental sustainability. And yet, the way food is currently produced, the way it's processed, and even the way it's consumed is threatening the health of people and the health of our planet. And so, in this firecracker short panel that we're about to have, we're going to be focusing on the link between diets, human health, and planetary health, but also the converse link between food loss and waste, hunger, and climate change. It's my absolute pleasure to introduce my panelists who are standing by, ready to give you some of their insights on this topic. I'm going to start off by introducing Ms. Gerda Verberg. She is really going to be speaking to the theme of building resilient health systems for a healthy population. She is the coordinator of the Scaling Up Nutrition Movement, or the SUN movement as we call it, and the Assistant Secretary General. She has extensive and broad experience from politics as well as international cooperation. Her accomplishments are wide and varied, but I'm going to focus on just one of these, that being that from 2011, she has served as permanent representative of the Netherlands to the United Nations, Rome-based agencies like the Food and Agricultural Organization, the WFP, as well as IFAD. Thank you very much, Madame Verberg, for being here with us. We are going to come to you shortly. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to also welcome Professor Cheryl Hendricks. Her theme today that she's going to be taking us, deep diving us into, is the theme of the true cost and price of food. She is, of course, the head of Department of Agricultural Economics, Extension and Rural Development at the University of Pretoria in South Africa. Professor Hendricks is a food security policy expert, and she comes into this conversation with extensive experience in policy analysis and program design. Thank you very much, Professor Hendricks, for being with us once again. We also have Dr. Tony Simons. He's going to be really bringing in some of those healthy planet perspectives. Dr. Simons is the Director General of the World Agroforestry Center. He's worked for close to 3 decades now on issues at the tropical agriculture and forestry interface. And he's done this work in more than 40 developing countries. So to Dr. Simons, thank you very much for being here with us today. It gives me great pleasure to also welcome Dr. Evan Gervets. He's a principal scientist and global program leader looking at finance and investments for climate action at the Alliance of Biodiversity International and the International Center for Tropical Agriculture. And his research areas span agricultural risk management, climate smart agriculture, as well as agricultural investment planning, amongst others. And so maybe to kick us off, I'm going to kick off with some comments and some insights from our panelists. I do also want to indicate that we're also going to be hearing a little bit later in the conversation from Dr. Gunhild Stordelin, who joined us a little bit earlier, and she's got some comments and insights that we're going to cross to in a little while. But first, Gerda, I'd love to come to you first. And really, the big framing question that I'd like to put to you is, what is the cost of not addressing the malnutrition burden that is such an important part of this conversation?
Yeah, thank you very much. Globally, it is in Africa alone, it is around $400 million a year. Globally, it's about 3.5 trillion. So that's quite something, but that's only the financial part. If we think of people and the harm that is done to people already from the very beginning by malnourishment, undernourishment of the body, but equally important, undernutrition, undernourishment of the cognitive development, it is much, much higher. So I would like to frame it a little bit more positive. So if Africa would be able to, and globally, we would be able to turn this around and to prevent hunger and malnutrition, gosh, what a progress we could make. People are very likely to escape poverty because if you are well nourished, your productivity is higher. Children are doing much better at school because their brains are well developed. And I mentioned the number of about around 400 million a year in Africa, but it's only a study of 12 African countries, so it's not only the whole recovery. So let me put it this way. I'm extremely happy that AGRA is putting nutrition front and center right now, because this is not about increasing yield or productivity. This is about smart investment in agriculture and food production that is preventing malnutrition for people, responding to planetary malnourishment, I would say, but also creating jobs for people and a decent income. And these are the topics we need to address. It's not rocket science, but put the food producers front and center. This is my main message. Start with them because they cannot afford to lose income, and they are the first that need to overcome poverty and their own malnutrition so that they can send their children to school.
Gerda, it's an excellent contribution because we are seeing the direct link to the Sustainable Development Goals. Especially what stands out is the opportunity to really reduce and eliminate poverty. But I'm going to be a little bit difficult because on the one hand, we need to focus on malnutrition, as you've indicated. But on the other, on opposite sides of the value chain, we also are experiencing massive food loss and massive food waste. I'd love to get your thoughts before I move on from you, Gerda, in terms of, what are some of the big ideas that we need to latch onto in order to minimize and do away with food loss and food waste?
Yeah, first of all, let's split the two, but also let's be clear on the number. The world produces already enough food to feed 10 billion people that are expected around 2050. But 1/3 of all food produced is lost or wasted. Now, in many African countries, there is a huge food loss. Around harvest, there is in some countries up to 30 or 40% of food losses. Why? Because there is no storage, there is no cold chain, and there is no processing of food. And here is the great opportunity. Next to making sure that farmers are not suffering from changing the food systems, making it more nutritious and more sustainable, there is a great opportunity to start the food value chain instead of exporting the raw materials for processing somewhere else in the world. Start the processing close to where food is produced so that it don't get lost, and that young people in most of the African countries can start to make an income because they can get a decent job. Coming back to your summary of my first remark, yes, people who look into things notice that good nutrition is the engine to start and implement all the Sustainable Development Goals.
Fantastic, Gerda. And I want to maybe make a link by coming to Professor Cheryl Hendricks from exactly what you've said, because when we talk about the true cost of food, Prof, we often talk about eradicating poverty, just as Gerda has done, but also there's a concurrent conversation about equitable livelihoods, about living incomes. How do we begin to reconcile the two?
Absolutely. We need to think very cleverly and come up with some very smart strategies to make these not competing interests, but actually they're the converging interests. And we can have a win-win for both of these elements. So the starting point, I think, is for us in Africa, and particularly for African governments, to decide what kind of transition we want in the food system. If we are just going to aspire to follow the West, we're going to increase our health costs, and we're going to have more unhealthy people, both on both sides of the spectrum. So there are many livelihood opportunities. So we look at counting the cost of what is really the environmental cost, what is the health implications of the current food system, and how do we shift the value systems we have for all stakeholders across the food system, and then how do we bring about incentives and disincentives, so incentives to change behavior positively and disincentives to discourage negative behavior. But in all of these decisions, there are significant trade-offs, either for health or the environment, or for livelihoods and health. There are many different components that we need to look at. But there are many examples out there of how we can produce food in a far more environmentally way that has also got health benefits and livelihood benefits for people across the food system. So the starting point, I think, is really deciding what do we want in Africa. We don't want to throw the value of our traditional foods, many of which are incredibly healthy and in fact are real food that we should be eating. So we want to nurture those and to provide more opportunities for people with livelihoods through the provision of those foods. But we don't want to do it at the expense of raiding the environment and for making food cheap at the expense of people's livelihoods. And we're certainly not talking about raising the price of food significantly without first having a look at social protection programs, re-establishing poverty lines so that people can actually afford a healthy diet. I'll stop there for now.
Professor Hendricks, I think it's an interesting one that you're sharing, the importance of being conscious about the trade-offs that need to be made and the horizons against which those trade-offs need to be made. I just want to come to a very quick follow-up question to you. I mean, you spoke about changes in values, changes in behavior, and one of those things that we've got to get right is the willingness to pay for the true cost of food. What is one of the ways that we can have a shift in the general population and also a shift from policymakers to want to pay for the true cost of food?
Well, making systems transparent is very important. That's a starting point. If we understand along the value chain who is getting what profit, and how that is distributed, as well as, for example, highlighting bad labor practices where we undercut wages. So a kind of labeling system could be useful, much like we have in fish, where you had green, orange, and red classifications. We could invent systems like that help consumers to know whether the food is being produced in an environmentally friendly way, but then also matching that with, is it healthy? We need a great deal more information about what is on the labels of food and what do those food ingredients mean for our health. So the more we industrialize our food system, the less healthy it becomes and the more detrimental it is to our health.
So, Professor Hendricks, I think that's fantastic. I'm going to take that and I'm going to transition and segue into a healthy planet perspective, because we've started off with healthy people. So, Dr. Simons, I'm coming to you, Tony, with a healthy planet perspective. Now, some of the new language that's come to the surface, nature-based solutions, regenerative agriculture, these are the conversations we're beginning to have. Can you simplify for us what these are, but most importantly, how do they contribute towards healthy diets that are good for people and planet?
Indeed, Nosy, thank you. There are many new phrases and terms in the agricultural space: nature-based solutions, team agri-food, regenerative agriculture, boosting soil organic carbon, agroecology, green infrastructure, and ecosystem-based approaches. Now, nature-based solutions is one that recognizes that natural and self-sustaining processes involving biodiversity and ecosystem services and the abiotic natural resources of our world are, one, under-recognized, and two, under-leveraged in their ability to support societal development goals. That's it in essence. So in terms of supporting a healthy diet, this means providing diverse agroecological conditions to enable a diversity of crops and livestock to thrive, both spatially and temporally. It also means the provisioning of variable combinations of production goods and services, such as light, as substrate, water, nutrients, symbioses, pollination, and indeed pest control. Thus, practices that seek to homogenize or attain an expedient uniformity run counter to this approach of nature-based solutions. So certainly we can't control nature, but we can protect and restore and manage it better. Now, that doesn't mean that it's the end of single cropping in a plot or a field, but it should be the end of the idea that widespread monocropping is a solution. And an end to widespread monocropping that requires ever-increasing external and artificial input. So humans, we're as addicted to salt and fat and sugar as monocrops are to fertilizers, pesticides, and plant growth regulators. And naturally, for our own health and the health of the planet, these addictions need to stop.
Sure. So one of the things that I want to build on that, Tony, as you talk about how these addictions need to stop, is the practice of leaving the most vulnerable behind. And so as a quick follow-up question to you, what would need to be true if we're going to be able to make available, for example, diverse, nutrient-rich foods? How are we going to ensure that that is also available for the most vulnerable of our populations, and that they do have access, and that as we come out of these dialogues and these conversations, we're not deepening already existing inequalities, and not creating inequalities in this nutritional space as well?
Yeah, indeed. Thank you, Nosy. So fortunately, much is already happening, but more needs to happen. Interestingly, African populations grow a higher proportion of the food that they eat than anywhere else on Earth, although the demand for healthy food has to come from both rural and urban households. The recent report highlighted that 3 billion people cannot afford to eat a healthy diet, when in reality, 7.8 billion people cannot afford not to eat a healthy diet. Now, farmers can only grow what is available in terms of, from a tree perspective, fruit, trees, and leafy vegetables. But there's, vastly underdeveloped seed systems and awareness of choice. And Norway is funding that through new projects in Ethiopia. The African Orphan Crops Consortium, based at C4 Aircraft Labs in Nairobi, is a joint initiative with University California, Davis, and many other African organizations to develop both a new cadre of breeders and to sequence and accelerate the development of these 101 African orphan crops. But these examples are far too few, and we need to scale up investment in tree-based and diversified diets with instruments and incentives for healthy crops and healthy diets. And with this in mind, we've launched this thing called Resilient Landscapes as a private sector, private investor facing arm to turn knowledge products and knowledge services into more sustainable value chains and value webs, because a truck is not only transporting cashew nuts, it's also cotton or cocoa and coffee and oil palm and rubber. Yep. And these are webs of value that we see happening. So I'll leave it there, Nosy. Thank you.
I think, Tony, that the call to action is so loud and clear. Scale up is what I'm hearing you saying. And let's look at chains and webs as well. I'm gonna bring in Dr. Geertz now. Evan, as we come into this conversation, the reality is, if we look at the latest climate report, it is absolutely spelling out disaster for the impact of climate change on food systems. What are some of maybe one or two big things that we need to do to really impact, or rather to mitigate climate change impact on food systems? What would that be?
And Nosy, you're absolutely right. Thanks for the question. That really the predictions are dire for the world and especially for Africa. The challenge is big, and it's not about just incremental, I think, interventions and changes that we need, but really a food systems transformation. I think we're hearing that here today also. Some colleagues of mine at the CGR research program on agriculture Climate Change and Food Security, CCAFs, have been working on this issue and put out some recommendations I want to highlight here today. You can find them on transformingfoodsystems.com. They start with rerouting farming and rural livelihoods to new trajectories. This is about really working on farm to intensify and diversify production so we can avoid agriculture expanding into other parts of the landscape, especially high carbon landscapes that we want to preserve the carbon and so stop the greenhouse gas emissions from there. Second, to incentivize climate resilient practices and low emission practices that can be promoted through enabling markets and public sector action. So getting those practices onto farms and farmers and others doing better to produce a better food in a climate smart way. We also, in another big way, need to de-risk livelihoods, farms, and value chains. And so this is more about bringing in kind of programs and services, early warning systems, adaptive safety nets that can help to secure resilient livelihoods and value chains. Also about bringing advisory services to those and farmers and value chain actors to tell them what the climate, what the weather looks like it's coming to be in the coming days or coming months, and to allow them to adjust to farm with the climate and to be able to adapt and de-risk themselves through that. Another big area I think of need, and we've already heard it here today, is around reducing emissions through diets and in value chains. And so a big one here is around reducing food loss and waste. And I think this is one where we really see nutrition, climate coming together. And there's the opportunity both to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions here, but also to build resilience in value chains by reducing the food loss and waste and to promote food security. And also work on changing diets to be more friendly. And I think that the issue of diversification, which has come up here, is another one that's important, both for healthy diets, but also for a healthy planet there.
Dr. Gevitz, I'm gonna jump in there because as you're speaking, I'm getting really excited about the possibilities based on technologies that are already on the shelf. Can you give us a quick comment there to say what are the best bet technologies already on the shelf that we could pull off the shelf to drive some of these big actions that you have put on the table?
Sure. I mean, there's a lot out there, and I want to say that really depending on where you are, what system you're in, you really need to identify what the right technologies are that you should be bringing in for those places. But some that I can mention are, I think there's a lot that we can do on breeding for new types of varieties. So for example, stress-tolerant beans are out there. And they're actually a great story here where they also happen to be high iron at the same time. So here you've got a bean variety that is providing multiple benefits here. I think these diversified cropping systems are really something that we need to be moving towards. I mean, this is not a silver bullet, but it's around bringing intercropping in, different types of crop rotations, forages for livestock, bringing in trees like Tony was just mentioning, and even fish as part of this. And there's many others. I mentioned the agro-advisory services, digital agriculture, as I think being a big one too, that we need to be bringing in that helps with this food systems transformation. But I think something very, very important there. But let me just mention, if I can, one thing is that to me, again, it's not about these individuals, it's about how we put these together into kind of innovation packages and that we see what can be scaled out, because we know that we're not reaching scale out there. And I just quickly want to mention, I know we're short on time, that I'm with the CGIAR. We're now embarking on a new phase of the CGIAR called the One CGIAR, where we're coming together. And really the goal here is to create new research partnerships and initiatives where we can together direct our research towards impact for specific parts of the food system. There are 30 new initiatives that are being designed right now and will be launched in the coming years, focusing on different parts of genetic improvement, building resilient agri-food systems, addressing systems level transformation of markets, policies, and finance that need to happen. But I want to mention that to me, bringing it all together is the key thing. And there's a set of regional initiatives, some here in Africa, in East and Southern Africa. I'm co-leading one of these with my colleague, Inga Jacobs-Mata. And some of the big things that I think that are important that could be happening here are, one, to diversify and intensify, a big one. De-risk and digitize, empower and engage youth, women, and build capacity. Incubate and accelerate SMEs. I haven't talked about it, but I think the SME ecosystem is huge for this. And so by bringing these together around enabling policies and coordination, I think here's where we can have the kind of platforms and partnerships that we can foster this climate smart food systems transformation that we need.
Evan, I think that's excellent. I did say to our audience, it's a firecracker conversation because we are really just getting to the tip of scratching the surface around some of the really big issues. I do want to bring in one more voice, and that's, of course, the voice of Dr. Gunhild Stortelen, who joined us a little bit earlier and shared the following comments as she was giving us her thoughts around how we might go about delivering planetary health, diet for healthy people and a healthy planet. And so we're going to get right into it, ladies and gentlemen, with our framing remarks, with the framing presentation. It's my absolute pleasure now to invite Dr. Gunhild Stortelen. She really is going to be giving us her framing remarks around how might we go about delivering the planetary health diet for healthy people and planet. She is, of course, founder and executive chair of the EAT Forum. She is a driving force linking climate, linking health and sustainability issues across sectors. And this, of course, to transform the global food system. We also know that in 2010, she was appointed as chair of the Summit's Action Track 2, and that was focused on shifting to healthy and sustainable consumption patterns, with a very wide mandate, as we know, to build a broad multi-stakeholder coalition around this key challenge and opportunity and leveraging the EAT platform to its fullest. It's my pleasure now to hand over to Dr. Stortelen for her framing remarks.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction, Nasifo. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm so honored to join you today during AGRAF 2021. And I'm so delighted that this important forum is putting such a critical topic on the table on delivering healthy diets for people and planets. Not very many years ago, such a topic would indeed have been almost unthinkable. Not just in the African context, but indeed anywhere in the world. I mean, who talked about dietary shifts, say 10 years ago, apart from those people pushing weight loss solutions? And who thought back then that in 2021, the United Nations would convene the first ever food system summit with shifting to sustainable consumption patterns and achieving safe, healthy, nutritious diets for all as one of the 5 key challenges to be tackled. And not last, but that your very own Agnes Kalibata would be leading the global charge towards this historic summit. As we speak, the summit is only days away, and the world is furiously preparing for this milestone event, as witnessed by what this AGRAF is all about. And thanks to this summit process, it is now more widely understood and recognized than ever before that our food systems, in fact, must be transformed for the sake of our people and for the sake of our planets. And that although there is still resistance to this idea in some important quarters, shifting to more healthy and more sustainable diets is a critical component of this necessary transformation. National dialogues are unfolding in now more than 140 countries. I think we are counting 145, setting the stage for nations to design their own national pathways to a sustainable, just and healthy food system by 2030. And this in itself is a massive game changer set in motion by the summit process led by Agnes. And a similar massive effort has indeed happened across the 5 summit action tracks to crowdsource game-changing solutions that can really add up to the systemic changes that are needed to evaluate, prioritize, and cluster these solutions, and now to build powerful, actionable, multi-stakeholder coalitions around these clusters and solutions. And here's the big test right around the corner. At the summit, we need to see, we must see that governments, the food industry, investors, and other major players are coming together and making real hard commitments for change. For boy, do we need real change, and we need that fast. It's near impossible for me to exaggerate how important this summit is. because how we go about producing and consuming food in our world over the coming decades will basically determine the future of humanity on this planet, nothing less. So the future is at stake, and nowhere is this more true than in Africa. COVID-19 is a clear warning to the world. We now have the science to say that unless we transform our food systems, we are basically doomed to suffer repeat pandemics. They might be even more deadly and more costly. And we are doomed to lose the global progress that had been gained in health, in nutrition, in social equity. We will not be able to limit global warming to 1.5 or even 2 degrees. And the destruction of nature and biodiversity loss will continue unabated. Hunger will rise, and diet-related diseases will continue to skyrocket around the world. And last but not least, maintaining peace and stability will become harder everywhere and next to impossible in many parts of the world. So the ambition of the Food Systems Summit is really to kickstart a transformation of our food systems to make them deliver enough, safe, nutritious food for all, and do so within safe environmental limits or within planetary boundaries in a way that is resilient, that is just, and that is equitable for all, not least for those actually producing the food we eat. Some might say now that, but Africa is very different. The challenges are different, whether we look at the nutrition and food access challenges, the livelihoods challenges, the problems are around financing and investments into agriculture, aquaculture, and fisheries, the environmental footprint of food, and not to mention the vulnerabilities associated with a changing global climate. And all of this is true, of course. You cannot simply transpose European or North American or Latin American or East Asian diagnostics and solutions into African context, of course not. And one of the reasons why other regions actually have to do more and faster when it comes to their own food systems is that they indeed are contributing directly to Africa's growing climate vulnerabilities, directly and indirectly affecting food security on the African continent. But I will say this, what every single region in the world has in common is that they all need to secure healthier diets, more sustainably produced food for all. And nowhere is the challenge for a food system transformation more urgent, more pressing, and also more full of exciting opportunities than in Africa. Perhaps the most consequential issue facing African food systems today is the ongoing demographic shifts in the continent. As you know, by 2030, over half of Africa's population is expected to live in cities. By 2050, Africa's total population is estimated to double to 2.5 billion people. An unprecedented share of the population over the coming decades in both rural and urban areas will be children and youth. But by investing wisely in this formidable wave of human potential, Africa can achieve a historic and massive demographic dividend, powering a transformation of the entire continent unlike nothing seen before. And food is at the heart of this immense opportunity for Africa, because healthy and nutritious food is the #1 critical input into realizing human potential. It's imperative that African food systems contribute to building healthy, sustainable, and livable cities, as well as vibrant rural communities, where also young people actually see a future in food production and in farming. African food systems must be shaped with the rising generation of young people in clear focus. They need to have a voice at the table and with a rightful role in realizing the imperatives of healthy nutrition, livelihoods, jobs, and economic security, and of course also resilient environments and resilient societies. In this future, Africa will not only feed itself, indeed, it will feed itself very well. And Africa can also play a critical role in feeding the entire world sustainably. Agenda 2063 and Agenda 2030 and other intergovernmental frameworks provide powerful political basis to address Africa's future for sure. However, these frameworks alone do not really offer an explicit agenda for food system transformation. And the next critical step will therefore be to build a robust, homegrown, really, and regional agenda for food systems transformation, which is something that I know is underway, and also for each and every country to chart their national pathways to a healthy and sustainable and equitable food future for all Africans. We in Action Track 2, working with the other action tracks, we have been hard at work in the recent months, and we have been forging strong multi-stakeholder coalitions around thematical solution clusters that have emerged in the process. One coalition that is already up and running and that you might be familiar with is the one on school meals. Obviously enormously important, and also an entry point for transformation, for health, for sustainability and local communities and local farmers. Another coalition that is taking a rapidly shape is one on food loss and food waste, called Food is Never Waste. And as we speak, a new global coalition is taking shape on shifting diets, healthy diets for all from sustainable food systems. And we hope that African countries, African organizations and food companies will come and join these coalitions, as many already have indeed. And these coalitions aim to provide access to knowledge, expertise, networks, partners and resources and peer-to-peer learning in support of all actors, but in particular of governments and their national pathways, and really drive collective impact to achieve healthy diets for all from sustainable food systems. So our strong hope is that these coalitions can really play a supportive role in shaping a regional agenda for the future, and that the national pathways that of course must be tailored to each country's specific circumstances will have resources and tools and expertise to draw on in that making. So it is exciting times, and I wish you all the most productive and consequential AGRAF 2021, and I look forward to collaborate. Thank you so much.
And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That is Dr. Gunhild Stordelin, who had just shared her earlier remarks with us. We have come to the end of our panel discussion, and so it is my absolute pleasure at this moment to acknowledge Dr. Gunhild Stordelin, to acknowledge Gerda Verberg, Dr. Tony Simon, Professor Cheryl Hendricks, as well as Dr. Evan Gervitz, who all have brought some of their firecracker insights into the conversation. And the clarion call is loud and clear. We have both opportunities and challenges. We are at a crossroads, and we have to make a decision. Are we going to invest in food systems that are going to deliver a healthy diet for people and a healthy planet as well? And of course, what we've heard in this conversation is that investing is more than just the finance. It also means investing in behavioral change, in values change, in mindset change, even in the way we partner together. And so with that, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Nozi Poshabalala, and it is and has been an absolute pleasure serving you as your moderator this afternoon. This plenary session has come to an end.